This is the new 2025 Mercedes-AMG E53, and it's a luxury sports sedan with over 600 horsepower and a starting price point of around $90,000. Now, Mercedes has not yet released the new E63, so for now, this is the sportiest version of the new E-Class, and today I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. All right, time to talk AMG E53, but first, a quick shout out and a thank you to Mercedes-Benz of Temecula, which lent me this E53 for me to review. Mercedes-Benz of Temecula is a fantastic dealership with a massive selection of all of the new Mercedes-Benz models, and they're great to work with. I have filmed dozens of reviews at Mercedes-Benz of Temecula, and I love it. So, thank you to Mercedes-Benz of Temecula. For more information on them, you can click the link in the description below. But on to the new E53. So, the Mercedes-Benz E-Class was redesigned for the 2024 model year, and the E53, this car, is new for the 25 model year. Now, Mercedes-Benz has not yet announced or fully revealed an upcoming E63, which we assume is on the way, and rumor has it that car will have over 700 horsepower. It's gonna be a crazy high-performance, top-of-the-line, ultimate version of the new E-Class. But before you go thinking this E53 is a cop-out, some compromised performance car, it has over 600 horsepower from a turbocharged plug-in hybrid six-cylinder. Now, that's a little unusual because the new C63 has a turbo hybrid four-cylinder, but the E53 has a turbo hybrid six-cylinder. It has a smaller number, but more cylinders. Are you confused? Well, so is Mercedes-Benz. But get past the confusion and check out the numbers, and you'll be impressed with this car. Like I said, this is a turbocharged plug-in hybrid. It's a 3-liter six-cylinder, and it makes about 575 horsepower and about 555 pound-feet of torque. Those are serious numbers. And if you go into the race start drive mode, you can temporarily boost the power up to 604 horses, over 600 horsepower in this car. Really pretty amazing. Now, these come standard with all-wheel drive, and so they're quick off the line. 0 to 60 is in the mid 3-second range, which is strong and where the E63 was not too long ago, even though this isn't the mighty E63. And since this is a plug-in hybrid, it can also drive on fully electric power. The EPA has this rated to do about 40 miles, a little over 40 miles on full electric with no gasoline assist if you want it to. So if you have some boring commute where you're not trying to get all the power out of it, you could drive it full electric for a surprisingly long distance. The only drawback when it comes to powertrain, there's no plaque under the hood. The 63 AMG models have that AMG plaque with the signature of the person who built the engine. Unfortunately, you don't get that here. Not that you necessarily need any more badging on this car, because it's already a little over the top as it is. You see, this is an Edition 1 version of the E53, and Mercedes-AMG makes Edition 1 models to commemorate the arrival of a new AMG car like this one, and there's always a lot of, well, stuff on the outside. For this car, you can see stripes going down the side, the entire side, and then a big AMG badge in back, just so you know you're looking at an AMG. You also have these big black wheels with silver lips on the outside, and it says Edition 1 in the very center of the wheel, again adding to the you're looking at an Edition 1. This car also has fully blacked out trim all around the entire exterior, which kind of adds to the visual appeal, or the look at me factor, if you will. And the color is this matte white. Mercedes calls it Moonlight White Magno. It actually looks pretty cool. But when you combine that with the blacked out trim, this is a bit of an eye-grabbing, call it attention-seeking car, and it's a little excessive. Now, you don't have to get the Edition 1 model, and in fact, skipping it saves you a lot of money. The Edition 1 package is over $25,000 extra on top of the base price. In fact, it brings this car's sticker price to around $117,000, which is big money. An entry-level base model E53 starts just below $90,000, which is a bit more reasonable, just like its look. Now, with that said, some people love the look of the Edition 1 AMG cars, and they're rare and limited production, so there's a special factor, and they seem to sell for more money on the used market too. People do pay up for an Edition 1. But regardless of whether you like this or the more understated regular E53, I gotta say this new E-Class is a pretty nice looking car. The overall design is sort of understated and classy. They're not trying too hard, even though it may seem like that with the Edition 1. The general look of this car is attractive and simple without going too far. It's a kind of a nice, refreshing change from many years of a lot of automotive design that went out there and tried new stuff. This is just a fairly traditional, tame design that still looks good. I also like the Mercedes-Benz three-pointed star logos in the taillights. That is a cool touch. You can see them back there if you look closely. And you can also see red trimming around the E53 badge in back. Mercedes-Benz is trimming the AMG badging with red if the car is a plug-in hybrid model like this one is, and that adds a little spice to the rear end look of this car. But anyway, next we move inside the new E53, and to get in, you unlock the doors and the door handles pop out automatically, which is a cool look. They're like delivered to your hands. You pull on the door handle, open it up, and you're immediately greeted by, well, some more Edition 1 stuff that goes a little over the top. Specifically, yellow stitching. You can see all over the seats, the steering wheel, the center console area, the dashboard, yellow stitching everywhere, and it doesn't stop there. You also have yellow trim. You can see on the seats this big yellow middle section, and yellow seat belts, which certainly adds some flair. And even on the headrest, you can see you have Edition 1 stitched in yellow right below the AMG logo there, again to remind you that this is the Edition 1. You even have a yellow AMG badge on the door sill. As you can see, every time you get in the car, you're greeted by pops of yellow in the Edition 1. Now, while I think some of that trim may go a little too far, I will say the Edition 1 does get you some nice benefits in here, specifically these cool sport seats, which you can see perforated leather, and they're tight, grippy. They'll keep you in place on the racetrack, and they just look cool. Both front seats are these sport seats, and it's an awesome look in the Edition 1. You also, in the Edition 1, get this cool carbon fiber center console where you have this carbon lid cover that covers up the cup holders, and even an Edition 1 badge at the center of this, reminding you once again that you've got the first edition E53. Now, with this car, you also get this thick steering wheel. You can see very thick, sporty steering wheel, Alcantara edges, yellow stitching like I mentioned, and an interesting quirk, it has some AMG-specific controls kind of sticking off the center of the wheel. So over on the right side, this little dial adjusts your drive mode. You twist it, and you can see the display screen, which this control has, will show what drive mode you've just switched into. Over on the other side, on the left, you have an even more complicated control here, where you have little buttons hanging off the control to turn on various items that you can select. You tap on the control itself, and it'll show you like a screen for the exhaust, for example, or for turning off traction control, or for going into track mode, various different performance items, sport mode for the transmission, etc. And you can dial up exactly what you want there, and then use the little switches at the end of this button to turn on or off these items. But beyond the Edition 1 stuff and the performance steering wheel, the other big focal point in this interior is the giant hyperscreen, which essentially runs from the side of the steering wheel on the driver's side all the way across the dashboard to the edge of the car on the passenger side. It's massive, and really it's comprised of two screens. There's a big central screen and then a passenger screen, which I'll address in a second. But let's start with the big center screen. This is Mercedes' latest MBUX infotainment system, and like other versions of MBUX, MBUX, it is fantastic. It is tremendously responsive, easy to use, very intuitive. Of course, also comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but if you're just using the Mercedes system, it's also really great. Now, this giant screen takes the place of virtually all buttons in this car, so you don't have a lot of them, but there is a row of buttons directly below the screen that includes some particularly useful ones. On the left, this AMG button will allow you to call up the drive mode so you can quickly switch without having to go into various screen menus. Just tap and you're there. You also have a button here to bring up the cameras, which is also a useful feature. You tap that and instantly you can see what's going on around the car. So if you're parking in a tight spot, you have instant visibility into exactly where you are without having to go into a menu or without having to shift into reverse to bring up the camera system. Now, one thing that some might complain about is the integration of the climate controls into this system. In previous versions of MBUX or models with a larger center screen, the climate controls have their own location at the base of the screen where you can adjust basically everything without having to go into a menu. That's not true in this car. You can make simple adjustments at the base of the screen, as you can see, but if you want to make more significant adjustments, you got to press climate menu and then go into a specific menu in order to change stuff. Some people won't like that, but frankly, I find it to be very simple, easy to use, intuitive, no big deal. A couple of other interesting things in this infotainment screen. For one, this car comes with a selfie camera. You can see it's mounted right here on the dashboard, facing the front seat occupants, but basically everybody in the car. And you can access it here, the selfie camera, and you can use it to like take pictures or maybe even record video while you're driving along if you want to take selfies, which is definitely unusual, but I guess the younger generation of E53 buyers may have that desire when they're driving along. This car also comes with a track pace app, which is like AMG's performance app that lets you measure and view all sorts of vehicle telemetry like lap times, but it also lets you start a drag race right here in your car. You turn it on and then the drag racing lights pop on and you can record like a 0 to 60 time or a quarter mile time or even a braking test all within your infotainment system so you can see just how fast of a driver you are. Now, beyond the giant center screen in this car, worth talking about the two other screens, which basically are on either side of the center screen. On the passenger side, yes, the passenger has their own display screen, and you can see when it's off, it just has the AMG logos surrounded by many other floating AMG logos. In regular Mercedes models, these are three-pointed stars. They look like stars in the sky, but here it's the AMG badge. Now, when you turn on this screen, you can see it's basically just a mirror of a lot of the functions you have in the center screen, which is only about 9 inches away. But in case the passenger wants their own screen, doesn't want to have to suffer the indignity of reaching into the center of the car, well, they can do that. And so these two screens right next to each other basically control the same stuff. Now, you also have a gauge cluster screen here. This one is directly behind the steering wheel in the driver's line of sight, and it's excellent. It obviously shows all the usual stuff like your speed, your odometer, etc., but it's tremendously configurable so that you can see exactly what you want. The music that's playing, you can have a full screen map pop up on this screen. It really allows you to show basically any piece of vehicle information you might want to see. Practically anything you want, you can dial up here. In fact, there's even a series of interesting designs that you can choose for this screen if you so desire, like this one, which almost looks like you're driving some sort of spaceship instead of an E53. It's cool how configurable this screen is. But anyway, beyond the screens, the other quirks and features in here, one interesting one is the climate vent situation, which is kind of unusual. You have sort of one giant continuous climate vent, which essentially goes the entire passenger side and center of the dashboard. And frankly, I like how they've done this. They've integrated it so it doesn't look like vents just sticking out in the dashboard. They don't look good. Instead, it almost looks like they intended to design it this way, and the climate vents are just an added functional benefit. And as you go down onto the passenger side, this line turns into the adjuster for the climate vent itself, where you can aim where it's pointed, and even finishes off by being the wheel that lets you open or close the vent. That's all pretty good design. I also like the sunroof control in this car, which is certainly unusual. There's no switch or button. Instead, it's a finger slider. You want to open up the sunroof, you slide your finger on this surface, and you can see here it opens the sunshade. And if you want to stop it, just tap your finger and the sunshade stops right where it is. Of course, once the sunshade is fully open, you can then slide your finger on this surface again, and the full overall sunroof will open. Same deal. You can stop it at any time and slide back the other way to close it. It's definitely interesting operation, and it's finding its way into a lot of new Mercedes-Benz models. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the new E53, which frankly is pretty well sized. This car has grown over the years. The interior space has also grown, and there is enough space in here easily for adults up front and adults in back. Even with these kind of hard-backed sports seats up front, I still have good knee room, good leg room. It's a comfortable place to be back here. And the rear of this car also includes some of the over-the-top Edition 1 detailing that you saw up front. So that means yellow stitching all throughout the seats, as you can see, and yellow trim in the seats, and obviously the yellow seat belts as well. Again, still a bit much in back for me, for my taste anyway, but that's the Edition 1 way. Now, a couple of nice convenience features back here. You do have climate vents in the back, two at the back of the front center console that you can kind of move and position where you want. You also have power ports mounted below those, so you can plug in devices back here, obviously, and heated rear seats, which is nice to have. Press this button on the door panel and they turn on. Now, back here, unfortunately, we do not have our own separate climate controls. You can see this little storage hole below the climate vents would be for climate controls if this car was optioned with it, but it isn't. Seems like a little bit of a miss at the $120,000 price point. You might expect that. The other drawback back here is this giant center tunnel for the drivetrain in the middle of the rear seats. It's so big that it effectively eliminates the realistic possibility of a middle seat passenger sitting back here. It's a shame it's so big, especially these days. So many electric cars can eliminate it entirely by having front and rear motors. Not the case here. Really robs center legroom. But with that said, one other nice feature in back, I like the dual sunroof situation. You got a front sunroof and an individual sunroof in back. You see that a lot in big body luxury cars like the Mercedes S-Class and Maybachs, but not often in mid-size cars like the E-Class, and yet here it is, the rear sunroof. Drawback though, you can't control it from the back. The Sunshade is operated in conjunction with the front sunroof, and so only the front passenger can actually open it. But it's still cool to have. And finally, we move on to the trunk in the new E53, and frankly, there's nothing notable back here except for the fact that trunk space is actually a little bit compromised. You can see the trunk floor is a little on the high side, and it doesn't lift up for more storage underneath, I assume because that's where various hybrid battery componentry lives. So you get a little bit less trunk space than you might expect in this car, but it still is pretty deep. You can get stuff in here, and it has some nice convenience features, hooks on the side as you can see, and also a little switch you can use to lower the back seats in case you have some large item that needs to stick through the trunk. But with all those quirks and features in mind, you're probably wondering how the new E53 drives. I know I am. Let's find out. All right, driving the new E53. Now, I'm pretty excited to drive this car for a bunch of reasons. Number one is it's got over 600 horsepower. You know, people hear, oh, it's an AMG that isn't the 63. Oh, it must be a lesser AMG. Well, 600 horsepower and 577, even if you're not using the overboost, that's not a lesser anything. This thing should still be pretty good. And also, as almost everybody knows at this point, I just love the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. I've now had 5 E-Class models personally, and I just really think the E-Class strikes a great balance between like size and comfort and luxury and performance, and I think it's just a great, great car. So first thing I gotta say is I'm pretty impressed by the comfort level of this car. Considering that it's on big wheels, it's a AMG model, and it has 600 horsepower, I'm honestly surprised by how relatively comfortable it is, which I think is maybe one of the nice benefits of getting the 53 instead of the 63. The 63 is sort of the all-out high-performance craziness. The 53, this car is a lot more rational and reasonable, or at least if you can call a 600-plus horsepower car rational and reasonable, I guess this checks that box. Now, one thing I will say is there's a surprisingly large amount of tire noise. I'm not really used to that in a vehicle like this. I don't feel a lot of road bumps and problems and things like that, but I hear a surprising amount of tire noise just driving the car around. And I guess these tires, for whatever reason, just seem like they're a fairly loud experience for this car from a performance standpoint. Pop it on it. Oh, this is fast. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I used to have these V8 AMG models, and I was always disappointed when, you know, like everybody, I've been disappointed to see kind of the fall of the V8 and the rise of the turbo hybrid, whatever. But Mercedes-Benz, almost uniquely, has done the turbo hybrid powertrain well, at least when it comes to 6 cylinders replacing V8s. They still have great, like, low-end grunt. They still almost feel like V8s in terms of the way they respond, their low-end torque, they're just like solid acceleration feel on the road. And this car is no exception. The one thing Mercedes hasn't done well in terms of going engineing down is like the C63 going from a V8 to a 4-cylinder. But because this has the 6-cylinder, it really feels like it's got the grunt of a V8. Like, this is what I expect when I roll onto the throttle in a V8. And it really does do a good job of rolling on, of getting performance going, of getting acceleration going. It's kind of surprising. It's actually quite nice. I don't have any complaints about the powertrain in this car. It does pretty much exactly what I'd expect it to, and it drives well. Now, in sport mode, like I am right now, the shifts are a little bit on the harsh side. That's a fairly normal kind of sport mode thing to do. I'm going to shift now into comfort mode. And really, that's one of the cool things about this car, and I think that's one of the real, like, benefits of the E53 specifically, is that the ride quality can be pretty reasonable, and you can drive the car fairly normally, or you can have an experience like you're driving a ultra high performance sedan, because you're doing that too. And I really like that about this car. I've not generally been much of a fan of the 43 model Mercedes-AMG cars. I think they're a little bit too buzzy, a little bit too kind of decontented from what in my mind an AMG car should be. But this particular car, the 53 level, does seem like a pretty good balance. It's comfortable, and yet it's also fast. The 63s have become so expensive and so powerful. The rumor is the next E63 will have over 700 horsepower, and it's just gotten completely crazy and out of hand. But if what you really want is just a nice, you know, fun, drivable performance car that isn't too crazy, isn't too expensive, and this is still pretty pricey, this actually does a pretty good job of delivering that in kind of an impressive way. Like, it really checks all the boxes. It's comfortable, it's fast, it's high tech, and this is why I like the E-Class. It really does have kind of the perfect slice of the pie. And a regular E-Class is definitely fast enough for just about anybody, there's no question, an E450. But if you do want to go a little bit crazier and get something like pretty nuts, but not out of the world E63 nuts, this car strikes a damn good balance. And the price is not insane considering where, you know, the E63s used to be. This has basically E63 level performance, but without that, you know, price tag and the crazy level of power and insanity where these things have gone. And so that's the new 2025 Mercedes-AMG E53. This is an impressive luxury sports sedan that strikes a good balance in the new E-Class lineup. Powerful and sporty, but not excessively so. Luxurious, but not boring. I love the new E-Class, and this is an excellent version of it. And now it's time to give the E53 a Doug's score. And the Doug score is here, 68 out of 100, which puts the new E53 here against some rivals. The E53 is near the bottom of this list, but it actually performs quite well when you consider this isn't intended to be the flagship performance E-Class. That duty will likely go to an upcoming E63. But while an E63 may be even more impressive, it's hard to deny just how great the E53 is at a more approachable price point. Although I'm sure a future E63 will be great, I actually think most enthusiasts should probably just skip it in favor of the E53. It really does most everything incredibly well.